Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to another segment of 5149 on Breaking Points, where we dive into different topics at the intersection of business, politics, and society. And today, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is no longer science fiction, right? Most, if not all of us, already use AI-powered technology on a daily basis, or it's being used on us. And it's a scary, powerful technology, one that could be used to make our lives better, for sure, but also one that has major ethical and moral implications that need addressing. So the question I think we need to all start asking is how AI technology can be abused by the tech companies themselves who develop and monetize this technology, and by governments, both authoritarian and democratic, and what we can and should do about it. First off, where there is money to be made, venture capitalists flock. This is a chart from NYU professor Scott Galloway's blog showing that AI investments from VCs have skyrocketed since 2020. Over $100 billion has been invested in AI startups since 2020, and funding doubled in 2021. Now, capital at this kind of scale creates both opportunities and challenges. Opportunities in that the pursuit of technological breakthroughs are not bound by resource constraints, but challenges in that the financial interests of capital necessarily leapfrogs all other considerations, whether they be ethical, moral, social, ecological, etc.
AI has been an important way we approach our mission. In 2001, we were using a simple version of machine learning to suggest better spellings on search. And by 2011, deep learning techniques were helping pave the way for things like better speech recognition and more accurate maps. A decade later, AI powers so many of the products people use every day. We see so much opportunity ahead and are committed to making sure the technology is built in service of helping people. Like any transformational technology, AI comes with risks and challenges. That's why Google is focused on responsible AI from the beginning, publishing AI principles which prioritize the safety and privacy of people above anything else.
That was a snippet of Google CEO Sundar Pichai's opening remarks at Google AI 22 earlier this month, saying all the right things, right? Google will engage in responsible AI development in service of helping people, prioritizing the safety and privacy of people above all else, yada, yada.
We end today's show looking at protests inside Google over a secretive project to provide advanced artificial intelligence tools to the Israeli government and military. The Intercept recently obtained documents about what's known as Project Nimbus, a $1.2 billion cloud computing contract between Google and Israel. The Intercept reports, quote, documents indicate that the new cloud would give Israel capabilities for facial detection, automated image categorization, object tracking, and even sentiment analysis that claims to assess the emotional content of pictures, speech, and writing.
Now, that's a little bit different than what Mr. Pichai promised.
Project Nimbus will be a big, ugly moment in Google's history and a shameful and embarrassing engagement. Project Nimbus will demoralize and agonize the many Googlers who truly believe and stand for Google's mission and values.
Working at Google was always my dream job, until I learned about Project Nimbus. I feel like I'm making my living off the oppression of my family back home. If Google truly believes in avoiding unjust impacts through the use of their AI, then why are they choosing to profit from $1 billion contract with a government and military which consistently violates international law?
That's a good question. Why are they choosing to profit from a $1 billion contract with a military which consistently violates international law? Well, it's because they have to, right? The VCs, they've identified a technology that no doubt can be monetized, and they've invested billions in hopes of making trillions. And, this is what they do. This is why they exist. But then companies, even the behemoths like Google, who aren't necessarily at this stage recipients of VC money, they still must respond to similar pressures from their shareholders and from Wall Street, who expect high returns, and thus Google must continue to find ways to boost earnings. Unfortunately for them, according to recent reporting from AP, their primary revenue driver, which is advertising, has slowed down dramatically, which in turn has eroded the company's profits in recent quarters. This means that in order to keep the investors and shareholders happy, they must find alternative revenue streams, AI being one of them. And this is kind of what I'm talking about when I think is so concerning, this inevitable incompatibility between ethical considerations and the financial realities of big tech, which the employees within Google have tried to speak out against, because they're right. The way we do business today has profound impacts on society and democracy around the world.
Now, the idea that we might one day have machines that can think like humans raises a whole bunch of ethical and philosophical questions about what it could mean for society.
Ava, go back to your room.
Never mind the fears about the next level after that, artificial superintelligence, where the machines go beyond human intelligence and we start moving closer towards those sci-fi extremes.
Almost every major jurisdiction is thinking about regulating AI in some shape or form.
I'm glad governments are somewhat awake on these dystopian type scenarios, and throughout the world they are looking for ways to regulate AI, and they're right to do something about it. But that effort will be perceived by VCs and investors in big tech as a direct threat to their long-term profitability, especially in those AI applications that fall in the moral gray areas like that have to do with civil liberties and privacy. So the inevitable outcome is a full court press to protect their investment. This is a report from earlier this year. Big tech loves talking up privacy while trying to kill privacy legislation. Study claims Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft work to derail data rules. Essentially, big tech giants have deployed an army of 445 lobbyists to influence lawmakers ahead of the introduction of privacy bills in dozens of states. That is obviously not a new playbook. Lobbying with cold hard cash is rather effective, but something that is equally effective, as the famous saying goes, is to manufacture consent. And this time it's to manufacture public consent to fight a new Cold War. Why an us versus them approach to China lets the US avoid hard questions. As national security framing and fears of China's AI advancements propel US AI policy, some human rights watchdogs worry it will facilitate a focus on AI investments with military applications and allow the US to deflect scrutiny for its own AI practices. Now, I'm not saying China and the ambitions of Chairman Xi isn't something the world shouldn't be concerned about, because we should, but because the West, we just don't have a lot of visibility into how things work in China, both socially, politically, culturally. China's threat to national security is opaque. It's kind of perfect for stoking public fear. Former Google CEO turned AI investor Eric Schmidt said in an interview last year, quote, "Why don't we wait until something bad happens and then we can figure out how to regulate it? Otherwise, you're going to slow everybody down. Trust me, China is not busy stopping things because of regulation. They're starting new things." Okay, why don't we wait until something bad happens? Why not?
The AI system was found to be a factor in the 2 plane crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX, one in Indonesia and one in Ethiopia. 346 people died.
The Autopilot was AI powered, and it wasn't designed to allow for a human override. So it gave dangerous nose down commands and it forced the plane to crash.
Right now, we're really worried about things like mistakes, algorithmic mistakes. It's not a mistake by the computer. It's a mistake about how it was written, how the code was written, and whether or not the processes were put in place for adequate recourse so that you can tell if something's gone wrong.
The stakes get even higher when we're talking about war and AI being used in lethal weapons. We already have armed drones controlled by people that use AI technology. But it's not a big stretch to get to fully autonomous weapons. So machines making life and death decisions about who or what to target.
It's probably inevitable, but it's really quite scary. You can imagine some really bad situations happening.
Imagine in the Taiwan Strait, for example, having a large group of American drones facing off Chinese drones, and they're trained on classified data, how these 2 swarms of drones interact and whether they might accidentally fire at one another because they mistake maybe some light reflecting of a drone for an attack. That could mean that you accidentally end up in a war or even a nuclear conflict.
Yeah, nuclear war. Should we wait until it gets to world destruction before we do something? We wouldn't want to do anything that jeopardizes your ROI. By the way, CNBC reported last month that Eric Schmidt has helped write AI laws in Washington without publicly disclosing his investments in AI startups. Yeah, I'm going to keep reinforcing the unfortunate truth that policy is driven by capital and that the interests of capital have risen above the interests of the American nation. And by being aware of this fact, we can help better decipher the various ways politicians and business leaders misdirect our attention to further their financial or political interests. Knowledge is power. Quote, it's easy to criticize China or some of the other autocratic governments and shield the US and other democratic countries from criticism. Some of it is legitimate criticism, but it's very easy to use that approach to deflect any responsibility and accountability for the things that other countries are doing and use this AI race framing for more funding into military or surveillance technologies, which then find their way into experiments in domestic law enforcement or migration management. That was a quote from Merv Hickok, Senior Research Director and Chair of the Board for the Center for AI and Digital Policy, a nonprofit AI policy and human rights watchdog. And that is the point of today's segment. It's clear at this point that AI has a myriad of practical applications in both the public and private sectors. Things like commerce, the way we communicate, our transportation industry, our infrastructure, our domestic and national security. I could go on. But like I said, it is a powerful technology, one that can be used to analyze the populace, surveil people, and ultimately control societal behavior. And once corporations and governments, both authoritarian and democratic, have a taste of this kind of power, they are unlikely to let that power go. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this segment, I have another one diving into the insane invasion of privacy at this year's World Cup in Qatar. Head on over and subscribe to my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee, to check that out. The link will be in the description below. And as always, remember to subscribe to Breaking Points. Thank you so much for your time today.